Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary friends. Welcome back to Tromsø Twilight, the channel where I, Vincent, talk to you about books, movies, and music that I find interesting. Some days I think about how the world will imminently end and nobody will be able to watch these videos. But other days I think about how the radio waves of the internet doubtless emanate into deep space, and some future generation of intergalactic beings will one day see my videos explaining films for which they have absolutely no cultural context. And the film today, which we will be discussing, is Companion, the 2025 film, written and directed by Drew Hancock. This video will include spoilers because this movie introduces its two major twists within the first 20 minutes. And it's difficult to discuss the rest of the film without giving away what these twists are. I'm pretty sure that if you saw the trailer, which I did not, you already know at least one of the twists. And also one of them is kind of signaled constantly from the very start of the film. So the film begins with a couple played by Jack Quaid, who is playing a character called Josh, and Sophie Thatcher, who is playing a character called Iris. And this couple come to a retreat far out in the woods to visit Josh's friend Kat and her boyfriend Sergei, who is Russian and who is significantly older than the rest of the people there. And then there's another couple who they meet there. Early in the film, it's signaled very clearly that Sophie Thatcher's character, Iris, is extremely devoted to Josh, even though Josh doesn't seem to treat her terribly well. He seems to be kind of a jerk. He seems to be in some way more interested in his friend Kat. And Sophie is constantly focused on making him happy. Before too long, it becomes evident in the film that Iris is in fact an android, a robot, a AI companion who has been designed essentially to be the perfect partner for whatever man or woman owns her. But the concept in this film is that Kat and Josh have hatched a plan to use Iris to murder Sergei in order to steal his money and blame it on a malfunctioning robot. The problem is that Iris is not aware that she is a robot. She believes that she is a young woman in love with the perfect man, Josh. Okay, so what did I think about this film? Well, I'll give you my general opinion of the film and then I'll talk a little bit about themes that I think are interesting. The film is good, it's well executed, it's consistently entertaining. It's marketed as a horror, but it isn't a horror. It's more like a satirical sci-fi thriller in the style that is now maybe most associated with Black Mirror, but which is kind of a very old tradition of like campy, satirical concept sci-fi. In my opinion, the film is referencing the fact that it's in this older tradition. It looks kind of 70s, 80s. It has a lot of music from those periods also. And the script reminded me a lot in its tone and its style of mid-90s films like Shallow Grave and The Last Supper, which were also these kind of black comedies set in remote locations. It's not exactly unpredictable, but it's also not super predictable. I think the film spoils itself slightly in as much as it tells you the ending right at the beginning, which removes some of the tension. You kind of know what will happen, but you just spend the film working out how. I think an enormous strength of this film is Sophie Thatcher, who is an incredible actress. She was also in Heretic, and she's doing something very similar here, which is that she's able to play kind of peril and innocence and strength and grit all kind of mixed together in a very convincing fashion. And she's able to make her character very likable right from the beginning, even though at the beginning she seems to be a relatively uninteresting person who's just focused on her boyfriend. There's something about the way that she uses her expressions which makes her so charming that you're kind of rooting for her. So as the film goes on and escalates and she's put into more and more extreme situations, you root more and more for her throughout the film. And that's a great advantage because the film banks a lot on the catharsis of her breaking out of her relationship with Josh. So in my opinion, this film is kind of a combination of two major tropes in more recent cinema. One is the kind of fear of AI robots taking over or being threatening or being in some way dangerous, which you see in Terminator 2001, more recently in Megan. The other is the film that explores relationships between AI and humans. Films which do this, for example, the movie called Zoe, which stars Ewan McGregor, which was released in, I've written it down here, 2018, directed by Drake Dorimos. You also have Her by Spike Jonze from 2013, sorry. Ex Machina by Alex Garland, which was from 2015. So this thing about love relationships between AI and humans and problematizing this has been at least a kind of trend for 10, 12, 15 years. Maybe the difference in Companion is that in the other films it's often about, like in Her and Ex Machina, it's about how a human falls in love with a machine, but the machine is not really capable of loving back in quite the same way. This film is the reverse. In this film, it's the machine that can love, and it's the humans who are in some way cold, cynical, unloving. The other thing that Companion is very clearly about, maybe more so than AI and technology, is domestic abuse and abusive relationships. It uses AI and technology and androids as a metaphor or a tool to show how men treat women as objects or how they are threatened by women's autonomy. And the whole movie is about her gaining autonomy and him trying to prevent her from doing so. There are many scenes throughout the film that are clear references to how abusive boyfriends manipulate, isolate, control, confuse, and brainwash their partners. And Josh is this kind of quintessential person who thinks he's a nice guy and thinks he's smart and thinks that he's charming and believes he deserves more than he actually gets. But in reality, he is self-centered, self-focused, and deeply uncharming as an individual. In this sense, I think that the film is an okay representation of domestic abuse. The problem with it is, in my opinion, is that Josh is too unlikable. He's obviously a kind of unpleasant, slightly pathetic incel. The type of person who we probably think would design a girlfriend and set her intelligence at 40%. I think that this is a slight weakness in its discussion of domestic violence. Take, for example, Big Little Lies, which I think was a better portrayal because the abusive partner in the first series of Big Little Lies is apparently an attractive, charming, likable, sexy, and interesting man who is of high status, but within the confines of his home subjects his wife to sadistic, controlling domestic violence and abuse and sexual assault. Now, both these types of relationship are equally plausible. We've all known a charming, beautiful, funny woman who we admire or respect who was in a relationship with a jerk who we felt didn't deserve her and who treated her poorly, and hopefully she realized. But equally often, perhaps even more often, domestic violence probably looks more like this relationship looks to Iris, or like the relationship in Big Little Lies looked, where it's not as obvious to the person involved that they're being abused, and maybe it's not so obvious to the people around them either. In this sense, I think maybe Ex Machina is a more interesting film because in Ex Machina, the conceit is that the android has to get the man to love her in order for him to rescue her. He won't rescue her because he sees her value or her autonomy. And it's only after the film that I realised that that's really what this movie was about. So in that respect, Ex Machina is more subversive, it's a little more interesting, it's a little more disturbing. It doesn't let the viewer off the hook in the same way as this film does, where we don't relate to or want to be like Josh. An interesting thing is that all of these movies are directed by men and all of them are written by men except from Megan. And Megan is the only one that is just like pure fun, a robot who is not interested in men, um, passes the Bechdel test, and just goes around murdering everybody. Uh, all of the rest of these films are all about what a female robot means to a man. One day we'll get the film about a woman who falls in love with her male sex bot. I hope it's going to be good. I think that's my review or my discussion of this movie. It looked great. It was entertaining. It was. It had that very kind of knowing, playful style that a lot of writer-director movies of this kind have, and I enjoyed it. The performances from the two leads were great, and I would really like to see Sophia Thatcher play a more kind of romantic role or a comedy. I think that she has a lot of range, and it would be really interesting to see how she can use it. This film, despite its strengths, it didn't say anything that you didn't already know. And it is a kind of a film by a man about the type of men he doesn't like and the type of guy he's sure that he is not. Thanks for listening. Have a nice day. Have a nice night. Have a nice evening. Have a nice morning. Have a nice life.